54 countries, over 2,000 languages, but united with similar interests. As news breaks, we give you in-depth analysis around Africa every Monday on Core TV News. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of the program Around Africa, where we bring to you top stories rocking the continent. And of course, today on the program, we'll be looking at the Boko Haram in Nigeria. Looks like terrorism has taken over the northeast part of Nigeria. And of course, in March, over 200 schoolgirls were abducted from their dormitory. Until now, looks like the rescue mission have failed over and over, and it has brought a lot of questions about the Nigerian Army's will to fight insurgency. This and much more will be digging deep to look and, of course, to see if we can bring solution out on the program today. My name is Brownson, Unwana, your host. Joining me on the program is Colonel Shobo Najib, retired general, and of course, he's also a security expert, lecturer in University of Lagos, security and strategy management. Good to have you on the program, sir.
Good afternoon, please.
Of course, we also understand security in Nigeria, it's a big worry. It started in 2009 where some group of people in the northeast, initial stage they said they were fighting for, they want to say, for the fighting against Western education, but looks like it has turned now. What do you think is really the problem in the northeast?
Well, there is no problem. The only problem we have is not the issue of northeast, it's the problem of the country. It's a national problem. It's the issue of insurgency. We're not even looking at the Islamic Caliphate now. We're not even looking at the issue of Western education. We're not looking at terrorists that have invaded the country. Yes, there must be an entry point. So they have been able to create a bridgehead in the northeast, and from that bridgehead, they can span out to other parts of the country. And then you start having their impact. And unless the government really embark on a strategic action to ensure they are immediately contained, then their wings may spread beyond expectation.
How did they find their way into Nigeria?
Well, first and foremost, you have to remember that when you are looking at adversaries, when you are looking at your enemies, you are looking at three aspects of enemies. One, you are looking at internals, you are looking at the externals, and you are looking at the collaboration of the internal with the external. That is collusion, in fact. So therefore, if you are looking at the present set of terrorists we have, which we refer to as Boko Haram today, you discover that they started as political thugs. And before 2009, which we are talking about, you discover that we have the gendarmes who are marauding the whole of the northeastern states. We have the retired military personnel from the Niger Republic, the sacked military personnel of the Niger Republic during his Enabri and his political opponents. When those people were thrown out of the military, they were thrown out with their weapons. So they started conducting armed robbery, establishing roadblocks and checkpoints to cut away money from our indigents. And that led to the establishment of a multinational joint task force to ensure these marauders were caged. And it was the beginning of the Boko Haram that we are presently facing. Whereas then, while these people were busy doing armed robbery and the military were busy containing them, the political stalwarts in the northeast, they were equally busy recruiting some indigenous locals as political thugs. And by the time the election was over and the people got back to the government house, the political thugs were left on the street of the cities.
In what way did the military guys try to contain them?
Come up with your question again.
In what ways did the military try to contain them?
Well, conventionally, if we have to look at the military involvement in fight against the terrorists, you discover that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria of 1999 saddled the Nigerian police force with the responsibility of the maintenance of law and order in the country. So by the time the insurgency raises its head, it is the responsibility of the Nigerian police force to ensure that adequate information is collected on the activities of these suspected Boko Haram, and then all their capabilities, their sponsors, and their operation modus operandi. And then the Nigerian police are expected to start curtailing them. And as the Nigerian police are curtailing them, the military are monitoring that curtailment. The military is following the details of that operation, because at that inception, there will be what we call a joint ops room, where the army is represented, the Navy, the Air Force, and the police are represented. Information that are going on, the operation, the way they are going on in their chronological happening are being followed, and they are being documented and recorded down for the purpose of record. And then, when the police can no more contain it, the police will make a request to the military, and then the military will go in to take over that operation. Then we have something on paper to give us the remote and immediate causes of this insurgency. And that being the case, you discover that now everybody is looking at the army. Nobody is even talking. How did the police started before it became the army's problem? And now look at it, they have left the whole issue for the military. It's not supposed to be the military alone. It's supposed to be the issue of the military. It's supposed to be the issue of the police, and of course the locals. A state of emergency was declared, but the civilian administration is still in power, but the military are operating in the states. So as much as possible, if you take a look at the issue of the military containing the Boko Haram, we equally have to start from inception. How did the military get to where they are today? Before we start blaming the military. And of course, if you take a look at it also, you see propaganda is an effective weapon of war. If our media houses have not been publicizing the activities of Boko Haram to be on the positive side as against the Nigerian army, I don't think the Boko Haram will have the guts which they have today to confront the military as it is.
But then if the military and the Nigerian police, just like you said, have been really containing these guys very well, how did they grow to become so powerful like they are now?
Oh, don't forget, they have a link already with Al-Shabaab. They have a link with Mali. They have local and international sponsors. If you look at the sources of finance of terrorist organizations universally, it is the same thing that is applicable to the present insurgency that we have in Nigeria.
Would you say that's one of the reasons why they've been so powerful, even more than our national, our army that have done even better internationally?
Let me quickly come in. They are not powerful than the Nigerian army. The Nigerian army are on the ground. They are doing their best, and the Nigerian army have the capability and the capacity to contain the Boko Haram.
Then what's the problem?
If the government declared a war against Boko Haram today, you can just give them 2 ways. Boko Haram will be a thing of forgotten in the country. It's simply because this is a democratic system. The president is the commander-in-chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces. He cannot stand up unilaterally and say he's going to declare a state of war. If you declare a state of war, the Nigerian army have the arsenals and the weapons to combat the war. They have the troops to fight that battle. At the end of the day, you will discover that the army will win the battle, but the war will be lost. Because you have suppressed the people, and then the issue of governance will have to be taken into consideration. That is why in our type of democratic system, you can't separate politics from the current exercise that is going on in the Northeast.
All right, let me hold you there. We'll go for a very quick break at this point. And when we come back, we'll be looking at the funding of Boko Haram in Nigeria. There have been lots of revelations, and of course, recent one linking former governor of a state, and of course, one of the chief of army staff. We'll be finding out and much more after the break. Stay with us.
One continent, 54 countries, over 2,000 languages, but united with similar interests. As news breaks, we give you in-depth analysis around Africa every Monday on Core TV News.
Core TV News, expanding your view.
Welcome you to From the Ivory Tower and happenings around the country. Varsity teachers get to air their views. Students are actually not left out. We bring you intellectual ends from the events happening around you. It is dedicated to educating the populace with a spice of entertainment.
From the Ivory Tower, Tuesdays, only on Core TV News.
A very big thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Around Africa on Core TV News. And of course, on the program today, we've been looking at Boko Haram and all the activity in Nigeria. And of course, still having on the program, I have Colonel Shobo Najib, retired, and of course, the security expert. A very big privilege to have him on the program. Sir, quickly, let's look at funding. Boko Haram, we've seen them carrying sophisticated weapons, and there's been this cause of worry. How do they get the funding? And also, how does this weapon get into Nigeria without being, discovered from at least the borders?
When we take a look at it, when you are looking at funding of terrorist organizations globally, you look at internal funding, you look at external funding, you look at individual funding. When you are looking at internal funding, well, thank God the president of the country have told us in the past that Boko Haram had infiltrated the government. Probably we'll look inwards and see who are those political stalwarts that were funding the Boko Haram. And then if you look externally, of course, the Al-Shabaab is there, Al-Qaeda is there, and we have the ISIS presently in Iraq and Syria. The Mali, they equally have some Islamic organizations there. So they could receive sponsors from them. And when you go to United States of America, or even if you go to Europe, most of the terrorist organizations are being sponsored by drug barons. So the drug barons could equally be part of their financiers. And then there are some individuals who are wealthy, who are good to go, who donate in form of charity to some Islamic organizations. So these people could get donations from them.
Now, is it true that Nigerian army do not have the kind of weapon to fight the terrorism?
The Nigerian army has more than enough weapon to fight the terrorists.
So what has the problem been?
The problem is you have to look at it that the type of insurgents we are facing is not a conventional war. It's a special operation. And the insurgents, if you remember the former National Security Advisor, I mean, the so rest in peace, General Assasi, told us that the type of insurgents we have today, we did not train for them. And that was the time people were making us, why should we say so? But it was a statement of fact. We are training for terrorists, a conventional terrorist. And when you are looking at a conventional terrorist, one, they don't operate in large numbers, they don't accept combat. They only cause damage and disappear. They engage in acts of sabotage, acts of subversion and damage, and they don't wait for them to be captured or to accept combat from anybody. But today, you see the present Boko Haram we tag them as insurgents. They are getting involved in conventional operations. They attack military posts, attack army barracks, advance to engage military men in large convoy of vehicles on Okadas. They were operating clandestinely. Now they have started operating overtly. So they are now daring the consequences of what is going to happen. So you now discover that the government has not declared a full-fledged war. And if war is not declared, it is not possible to contain the present Boko Haram we are talking about in the way people wanted us to convey them. Secondly, if you look at the publicity of our media, the media are portraying the activities of the Boko Haram more than the successes of the Nigerian troops. If the government could, as much as possible, place much pressure on the media men to ensure that there is total short blackout on the Boko insurgents activities.
Are you saying media should stop, reporters should stop reporting about the activities?
Well, from my own personal opinion, I think if the reporters are even reporting, they should be more objective in their reporting. Because before an incident happened, they have, like, for example, when the battle in Bama started, it has not gone halfway. When Al Jazeera have reported that Bama has been taken over by the terrorists, and it's a very good demotivating factor. The other time it was the Governor Sheriff that was Shetima that was saying that the Boko Haram were more motivated and well-equipped than the Nigerian. We said no, we wouldn't expect to hear that from a highly placed personality of the country. You should be able to, as much as possible, try to motivate your soldiers. Motivation is not only in terms of money. Give them adequate support. Give them force multiplier. Give them equipment and resources that they need. Let them know you are behind them. Let them know that you respect their profession, their expertise, and then they will move ahead. But
then Nigerian army at the point also came out to say that now there was a time this kind of rebellion within the Nigerian army where they said that the Nigerian army, the leadership was sending them to field to die. And looking at the kind of weapon, just like you rightly said, that we have Nigerian army have more weapons than the militant. But where are they? Because with what we are seeing, it looks like the terrorist guys have more sophisticated weapons than the army.
No. Please, let me quickly make a correction. There is no rebellion in the army. The army don't rebel. What really happened then was that they said the terrorists were more equipped than the Nigerian army, and we said, no, it's not true. And really, it is not true. If you take a look at the arsenals of the Nigerian army, you take a look at the forces the Nigerian army is presently having. These are the same set of people that have gone to various countries. They brought glory to this country. But unfortunately, we are faced with cases of insurgents in our own soil here in a democratic system. And for the government to say, look, go and turn that place to a desert, there must be wide consultations. So the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces cannot unilaterally stand and say, go and declare that place a desert. If you declare it a desert, what happened to the indigenes? Where are you going to take them to? Where do you relocate them to? The army can contain the Bokais. They can contain the insurgents within 2 weeks. But that should be a full-fledged war. It means you are looking at relocation. If you are looking at evacuation, is it going to be partial evacuation? Is it going to be full evacuation? And it's going to be total evacuation. Where are you evacuating them to? If it's going to be partial evacuation, where are you going to evacuate? Where are you going to live? How do you look at the logistic, their sanitation, their feeding, then their restoration? How do you look at it? These are things you should be looking at. So therefore, in a case where people are talking of total declaration of war, you could still remember, even the Sambisa forest we are talking today, there are still some people who are still living in Sambisa forest who are not indigenous of the Northeast. They still remain there despite the fact that there is war because they don't have any place to go. If you kill such people, the president will come up and say it is human rights abuse. So how do you remove the boys from the men? There is no clear-cut demarcation. And since total war is not declared, the military have to be very careful in the way the operation is carried out. The army has its own code of ethics. I'm not speaking on behalf of the army, but militarily, the president is in charge. And once he gives the go-ahead, the military will put in their best.
Now, let's quickly look at the involvement of the international community. When the over 200 girls were abducted from the dormitory, now, lots of community internationally came in and said they want to assist Nigeria. So far, would you say their impact has been felt?
Their impact was felt because when they came in, the MOU with the United States of America was that there is no boot on the ground, which means they will not commit their troops to combat. And if they are not committing their troops to combat, most of the assistance they are going to give us are surveillance, information gathering, synergizing. They want to assist us with relevant information that will assist us to plan our operation. And those are the responsibility of Nigeria, which Nigeria is embarking upon. And they are using those information to see the extent to which they can go to ensure that they win the war. Because we are not looking at the battle, because the fortification of the city does not depend on the number of arms and guns you put in that city. Rather, it depends on the winning of the hearts and the minds of the indigenes. Once the hearts and the minds of the indigenes are won, you discover that the war is won. Otherwise, the Nigerian army will win the battle, but they will lose the war. And then the president will pay for it. So this is why, as much as possible, the issue of the Chibok girls, it has to be taken with diplomacy. Yes, the soldiers are moving, but the government should equally embark on diplomatic moves to ensure that those girls are released diplomatically.
Now, quickly, should Nigeria take seriously the report of the Australian negotiator who linked two prominent people in Nigeria?
Those are mere assumptions. You are looking at Mr. Richard Davidson, the Argentina negotiator.
Australia.
Of course, we have Selkida. Selkida is equally a negotiator on behalf of Nigeria, who was located to United Arab Emirates because the family stays there. And then, of course, Alhaji Aminu is part of Nigerian negotiator, and we equally have other dignitaries that are negotiating on behalf of the Nigerian government. So if the Argentina negotiator, the Australian negotiator came up to tell us that is linking those two gentlemen, they are mere allegations. They are subject to verification.
But don't you think the government still have to at least make some kind of findings?
No, the government is working on it. The government doesn't drop any information. All information that have been passed to the government work on them for the purpose of substantiating them, either to lead the men to further investigation or to exonerate them. So the government is working on it.
What's the way forward?
The way forward is very simple. The government should come up with 3 committees. Retired generals of the Nigerian armed forces should be assembled. Let them provide solution to the terrorists. Then the Nigerian political parties, they should equally assemble, do brainstorming, and come up with the political aspect of the implication of fighting the insurgency in a total war. Then we equally want to look at the Nigerian rich men, the business mongols, who are supposed to finance the operation, donate food, donate money to allow the government to finance the operations. If you look at the Nigerian civil war, the government of Nigeria did not borrow a single penny to finance the Nigerian civil war. Why is it that the operation that will not last us 2 months, we want to go and look for money to borrow? We have a large number of people in this country. Dangote is there, Otedola is there, Sheshengi is there, Al-Mustafa is there. So many of them, they have the money. So they should bring out the money to sponsor the operation on the field so that the government will be able to prosecute the insurgency and everybody could go to rest.
All right, of course, and that's how far we can go on this episode. I'm sure there should be part 2 of this program where we'll have time to really look at some other issues that this episode could not carry. I hope that you're obliged to our call. We'll call you for the conclusive edition of this topic. That's why we'll be drawing the curtain on the show today. My name is Brownson. One very big thanks for being a part of the program, while we expect that very soon peace will return to the northeast of Nigeria. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Continent, 54 countries, over 2,000 languages, but united in similar interests. As news breaks, we give you in-depth analysis around Africa every Monday on Core TV News.